diverse set of behaviours.
He Māori aho.
Your single source of truth.
The words don't pull it to me.
My husband is Samoan, so talofa.
Ngā tikanga reo, tikitahi.
Shea Kuvara of New Zealand's Parliament, Chloe Slaughter.
Penny houses.
And it's communist.
He whakatū future.
They've got mother, running holidays.
Tēnā tātou, nau mai, hara mai, whakatau mai rā. Welcome to another episode of our weekly ALL Report. My name is Pere Samah, joined by my co-host and wife, the beautiful Samah Samah.
Kia ora everyone, thanks for joining us for another episode.
We've got another packed episode. I say that every single time.
No, but this time less so, eh?
Less of a packed episode this time. And I'll just say a big mihi to Tulua Wilson, our ever faithful comment moderator. Just give a little bit of a round of applause, everyone, for Tulua. Faithfully here every time. Thank you so much to everyone who helps out, gives us little tips here and there, people who believe in us and want to see this kaupapa go somewhere. Thank you so much. And before we get into it, I will just say as well, just a quick acknowledgement of people who are doing it rough at the moment, to people who have passed on recently, moi mai rā. And just to, everyone who's feeling overwhelmed at the moment. We were having a little chat about it before, that we're going to cover some heavy topics, but, sometimes we like to laugh. Sometimes it might seem a little bit inappropriate, the making light of certain situations, but, you got to move, life keeps going, hey, and you can't be depressed 24/7. I'm not criticizing anyone at all at the moment as well, by the way. I don't want this to be misinterpreted. But that, we like to laugh and have fun here and there. And I think sometimes some people might think that we're not being as respectful as maybe we should be.
No one's complained, by the way.
No one's said anything.
Just us preempting any.
Yeah, but we've just been chatting that, we like to laugh and have fun, even though we're probably not very funny.
Sorry.
But we do like to talk about the important issues, or at least what we think is important. Kia ora to everyone, kai matara, tēnā koe, kia ora, welcome back everyone, glad to have you here. If anyone has any pātai, by the way, we're going to try and address our pātai live, as long as it's not too detracting, we'll see how things go. But we said we're going to be talking about the Treaty Principles Bill, a bit of a wrap-up of the Treaty Principles Bill. Even claiming that you're going to do a wrap-up of the Treaty Principles Bill is like quite a big daunting thing, so we'll see how we go. We'll also just touch on a few things, some things that have come up in the headlines and just various stuff that we're interested in at the moment. So I'll hand it over to you first, Samah, and we'll take it from there.
Oh, bye. And kia ora to Chapman, love your work.
Oh, kia ora too.
Glad you're here. Okay, so before we get into some of our local news, I just wanted to do a quick wrap up of what's happening in Palestine. So for the past 12 days now, Israel has blockaded the entry of everything into Gaza. We always knew this was going to be an ongoing thing and that it wasn't a final ceasefire. As many Palestinians have told us, ceasefires with Israel just means that Palestinians stop resisting while Israel continues the fire. So, New Zealand hasn't issued any statements on this, even though the Australian Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, did condemn this, because it's an easy one. You can't, deliberately starve your occupied people to death, but yet here we are, and New Zealand hasn't said anything about this. The next one, and again, just want to say a trigger warning for any victims of sexual abuse, because the next story is pretty rough. I'm not going to go into too much details though, because I haven't read the report personally. But basically the United Nations just released a 49-page report documenting what we already know, which is that Israel uses sexual violence as a weapon of war. Those of you who have been following us know that we have covered the way that Israel uses sexual violence against its Palestinian hostages, of which there are thousands, and which is a continuing ongoing issue. We talk about the hostages that were taken on October 7th, but every day since then, Israel has been taking hostages, and that doesn't get talked about. And of course, every day before then as well. But we know they've been using sexual violence in their torture dungeons against Palestinians, even to the point of killing people using sexual torture. It's really horrific stuff. But again, this doesn't get coverage in New Zealand media, even though, for example, we had Jack Tame pushing the lie that Hamas used sexual violence on October 7th, even though there is no conclusive evidence that that happened. There are no survivors from October 7th who have said that they have been victims of sexual violence. There are no equivalent UN reports that show this conclusion at all from the Israeli side. And yet we had Jack Tame saying it when he was interviewing the Palestinian ambassador. In fact, they snuck it in, I think it was after an ad break, without giving the Palestinian ambassador a chance to respond.
Yeah, that's right.
And in another situation, they also, Jack Tame allowed the Israeli ambassador to repeat these lies without correcting him. So despite allowing these lies and actively promoting the lies that Hamas used sexual violence when there is no evidence that they did on October 7th, they haven't covered the fact that Israel continues and has for a very long time, unfortunately, used horrific sexual violence as a weapon of war. So just wanted to cover that. I haven't read the report yet. I'm sure it's going to be horrific reading. But I just wanted to put it out there because it's a very important report. I also wanted to just really quickly cover the clampdown on free speech happening in other so-called like-minded countries like the United States and Australia. So many of you may have heard about this really big news, thanks to mostly people on social media. But Mahmoud Khalil, a Colombia admin and ex-student, was an organizer of protests at Colombia and the encampment that happened there. And he's a green card holder, okay? So he's not yet a resident of the United States, but holds a green card. So he's meant to be afforded the same rights and, as everyone else in the United States. But they arrested him and have disappeared him because they didn't let his lawyer or family know where they went, and hasn't been charged with any crime. So have I got my mouse?
You do, sorry. Just welcoming our whānau.
Oh, can't wait. So we've got here, they went on this right-wing outfit, the Free Press, and told them explicitly the allegation here is not that he was breaking the law. So this person holding a green card wasn't breaking the law, has been arrested, and they explicitly say that he's being used as a blueprint for investigations against other students. Basically, they're testing the water. They're seeing what they can get away with. Can they deport a green card holding person without having committing any crime, but simply they didn't, for the fact that they didn't like that he organized some really powerful and successful protests. Now, I bring this up as well because I think this is something that we need to be aware of in Aotearoa. So we are part of this treaty called the IP4. And the IP4 is between Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and the Republic of Korea. And basically, it's a NATO-aligned group. It's basically like a NATO group. We're essentially informally joining NATO through being in this group. And they have a few aims. They have 4 flagship projects, and one of those projects is tackling disinformation. And in this Japanese press release, they say that this flagship project, the 3rd one, is about targeting hostile information, including disinformation. So that's extremely vague when we're talking about hostile information. Is it just going to be anyone critical of Israel, like we're seeing happen in the United States and Australia at the moment? Is it anything that they don't like against what we're in terms of NATO expansion in the Pacific? And I say that because this pro-war US think tank explicitly says one example of such disinformation is the fact that, well, it's not a fact, it's in their opinion, that Chinese and Russian disinformation campaigns have propagated the narrative that NATO is attempting to expand into the Indo-Pacific. So that's not Chinese and Russian disinformation. It's a fact that they have for a long time been attempting to expand NATO into the Indo-Pacific. But that is concerning, that's the kind of stuff they're going to label as hostile information and disinformation. And so, you know, keeping a close eye on the clampdown of free speech in the United States and Australia, because I don't think it's that far off for that kind of stuff to happen in New Zealand, for them to target, you know, groups like us that might say some information they might consider hostile. Thankfully, I am a citizen. Don't worry, everyone. And I'm on Ngāpuhi land, so feeling mostly safe. But yeah, this is something to keep our eye on in terms, and, you know, of course, we know the Free Speech Union isn't going to protect us, right? They have people like David Kuman, they have crossovers with the Israeli Institute, which has been actively trying to shut down free speech when it comes to supporting Palestine and being against the genocide. So Free Speech Union is not going to have our back when it comes to this.
And can I just interrupt you there? Don't want to throw you off track, but I realized I said that we'd talk about this. The Free Speech Union, for those who aren't aware, are trying to take over Internet NZ at the moment. Some people may have seen some articles about this recently, about how the Free Speech Union is trying to do some kind of a takeover of Internet New Zealand. Internet New Zealand, my understanding of them, I haven't really looked into them too much, but for any website that ends in .nz, Internet New Zealand is in charge of setting standards and, you know, alerting officials if something's wrong, and just managing various standards in terms of what's expected of a .nz website. And so what are they doing, Free Speech Union? At the moment, Internet New Zealand are having a meeting where they're deciding on some constitutional changes. And what is that constitutional change? Well, they've decided they want to be a co-governed entity. And so again, we're seeing the Free Speech Union decide to rear themselves up and take issue over something that's a Māori-related kaupapa.
So they're trying to stop this co-governance approach?
Yeah, they're trying to stop it by signing up all of their members, well, not all, but they're encouraging their members to sign up, to become members for Internet NZ, so that they've got voting powers at this upcoming meeting. But there is a stipulation in the Internet NZ code of conduct, or whatever they call it, that you have to be a member for 3 months before you can have a vote.
Okay.
So Free Speech Union is going to have to wait for the next meeting before they can actually have any influence over Internet NZ. But yeah, so hoping Internet NZ has gotten a good amount of support on the other side of the free speech, so people can balance that out. If you're worried about this kind of kaupapa, consider becoming a member of Internet NZ.
It does cost.
It does cost. I think it's about $25, but it is an alarming thing, because when you watch the right wing, for lack of a better term, and you watch the anti-treaty movement, these people are very savvy in the digital space. Very, you know, if you look at internet forums, if you look at Google search results and all of those things, very dominated by the right wing. They're very good at filling those information spaces with their information. So if anyone who is in the gray space or on the fence about anything, just doing a innocent Google search, it's often these right-wing astroturf groups like the Free Speech Union and Taxpayers Union, etc., New Zealand Centre for Political Research, all of these guys who are really good at just filling the internet with misinformation, just riddling the whole place with misinformation. And what I'm seeing is that once Internet NZ starts operating as a co-governed entity, you know, there's going to be a clampdown on harmful misinformation, especially, you know, racist te tiriti information. Internet NZ was alerted at the need for this type of change because of a particular live streaming of a really, really offensive killing, a really, really inappropriate killing of someone, and they were too late to respond to this thing that happened. And that and we should look into it, but it's, you know, it was the Māori members who stood up and said something about it, and they also had a few of their Māori members step down, like leave the organization because of their mishandling of the situation. And so that's why they've decided, okay, we need to bring more Māori perspectives into our organization to make our people, the internet, more safer. And so that's what has sparked this whole thing, you know, just trying to trying to put some safeguards in place. And, you know, you always have to be careful when things are done under the guise of safeguards, but I see a very legitimate reason for the path that they're taking here. But yeah, you know, sorry to interrupt. Maybe you can get back into your flow. But yeah, so the Free Speech Union is really trying to take over that space at the moment. If you've got a spare $25 for
Is that
per month.
someone asking? Is that a one-time?
Oh,
cost?
actually, I'm sure it'll be
Is it
yearly.
annually.
It'll be yearly, yeah.
Annually,
It will
okay.
be an annual cost, surely. Otherwise, those guys are raking
But
it
you
in.
know, it just highlights how much more access these groups that do have money and members who are more likely to be well off, in the way that they have greater access to things that change meaningful policy in this country. You know, and it's not just through donating to politicians, but there's all these backdoor methods that they can basically disrupt normal democratic functions, because Internet NZ has its normal, you know, members, people that are interested in this kaupapa and have been for a long time. Those are the people who went to go join, but the Free Speech Union, it's not like that they're interested in that kaupapa. They just want to disrupt the normal trajectory of being, you know, more aware of Te Tiriti o Waitangi and our relationships with Te Iwi Māori and Pākehā and Tauiwi. And I think, you know, that's the common theme across the country. I'm sure we're going to talk about it more, but like government bodies and just, you know, people who, you know, in the education sector, people who have more likely to be knowledgeable about Te Tiriti o Waitangi are considered radical by the government simply for knowing basic facts about Te Tiriti o Waitangi and about what's happened during colonization. And so these guys are trying to disrupt the very normal flow of society, you know, because the normal progress that we're making, and they are trying to get in there and stop it. But yeah, I'm sure we're going to get more into that.
Yeah. And one thing, I don't have evidence for this. It's just something that someone brought up as something that is suspected, is that the Free Speech Union has actually been signing members up to Internet NZ via like a fee. So really, as you say, people who are really not interested, but they've given permission to the Free Speech Union, hey, you can sign me up as well. And they just pay a little bit extra.
So just make
so
it
they have nothing to do
easier.
with it. And all it's done is given the Free Speech Union an extra vote. An extra vote, just because someone has given them that permission. So they're not going to be engaging with the organization. They're not going to be understanding why they've made these changes. There's just this political agenda that the Free Speech Union has. And because they've built up the platform that they have here, dangerous. Kia tūpato, washare hoa mā.
So that's all websites that end in .nz.
It's my understanding. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's quite a powerful group, really.
Yeah.
And yet obscure at the same time.
And I'm pretty sure the Free Speech Union is a .nz website.
Oh.
So they're probably worried about themselves.
Not popping up as the first thing on every Google search. Okay. So that's it when it comes to my little story about Palestine, and also the clamping down on free speech on our so-called similar nations. Back to Aotearoa. So I wanted to talk about this. There's been arrests of Destiny Church because of the assaults that they did when they stormed this library. And like, it makes sense. It makes sense that people who committed assault are then charged for assault. It would be strange if they treated Destiny Church any different to any other group of society, right?
Right.
At the same time, e te whānau, we should not be celebrating the charging and imprisonment of our vulnerable communities, even if they do attack our other vulnerable communities, even if they attack us. This is not a solution. We know the recidivism rates are horrific in New Zealand. They're over 50%. So a lot of people, most people who go to prison end up recommitting crime. So it's not making us safer. It's not resolving the trauma of those individuals that are sent to prison. In fact, in many cases, it increases the trauma. It's not addressing the root causes of the problem. And in many of these cases, it's trauma that has been caused by colonization. And I'm not saying this because I'm excusing any of their behavior. Absolutely not.
Killed it.
But we have to be more big picture about our solutions. We have to think about solutions that are actually going to resolve the issue, because as far as I'm concerned, sending people to prisons is actually a recipe for continuing this issue. Because Brian Tamaki is only able to exist as a cult leader because of the availability of vulnerable, traumatized individuals in society. People who have been brutalized by the colonial system already. And he's able to offer them a sense of control over their lives through this religious fascism route. And what it does is it just keeps them entrapped in that trauma space. It doesn't help them heal. It doesn't help them move beyond that. And then we're sending them to prison. That's not going to help them with that. It's also not going to resolve the issue of the existence of this vulnerable community that Brian Tamaki preys on. Because that's what we need to address. We need to stop the fact that certain sectors of our society are getting traumatized. And, we're not even doing that. We're not even doing that basic work of stopping the colonial abuse of people to begin with. So, what have we seen recently? That the Oranga Tamariki statistics show that abuse against children in state so-called care has actually been increasing. So, they're apologizing in government to historic victims of state abuse while they continue abusing people in state care. These are the kinds of people that Brian Tamaki preys on. And as you pointed this out to me once, but a lot of these people might be victims of sexual violence, and the way that he uses that trauma and that energy to project that onto a rainbow community instead of the actual cause of their trauma, which is the colonial state. For me, that's really perverse. And for us, we need to, I think, aim a lot higher in terms of solutions for this issue than simply charging them and sending this individual. It's an individual solution, right? An individualized solution. And that's what capitalism and colonialism always does. It makes both the causes of issues, it erases the context for everything and just turns it into one bad egg or a few bad eggs. These are not just a few bad eggs. These people with deep traumas and problems are the result of systemic issues, and unless we solve the systemic issues, the individual cases will continue beyond these 4 people that have been charged. So
and as well, what about Brian Tamaki? Like the individuals here are getting punished, but he's the guy that tells them to up the ante. He's the one who told them to storm the building. He's the one who fills their minds with these ideologies, gets people to come into his church and to think about their life, which is an amazing thing. Okay, that's cool. But then tells people to direct their frustrations towards the rainbow community. While, as you're saying, violence is increasing in Oranga Tamariki. Like the state violence is increasing. Our people are doing worse off. And yet somehow he's able to convince people that it's our Takatapui community. And it's crazy the fact that he's able to get away with this. He was able to encourage people to paint over the rainbow crossings as well. Just these criminal activity, The fact that he's able to get away with it is what's wrong with the situation here. So completely tautoko what you're saying. We shouldn't be celebrating the punishment of these individuals who are victims of an ideology that he has incepted into their brains.
Yeah, I mean, the colonizers allow cults to flourish in this country. It's not just Destiny Church, right? What's that other cult? And they do farming and...
Gloria Vale?
That's the one. Gloria Vale. It's absolute insanity to me that the government allows Gloria Vale to continue. It's just a cesspit of abuse and misogyny. And, it's happening right under our noses. We've had how many exposés? For me, this is the same thing. The fact that they're allowing this cult figure to prey on our vulnerable people is the issue. And as you say, he explicitly incited
Yeah,
violence. We have a
explicitly.
law against inciting violence. And I've seen some people, and I'm on our side, who have said, take this, Brian Tamaki, your people got arrested. He doesn't give a shit.
Mm.
He doesn't give a shit. If he gave a shit about his people, he wouldn't have put them in harm's way in the first place. He
Yeah.
wouldn't have incited them to do something that will get them into prison in the first place.
Yeah, like my understanding of Man Up, we're taking men who have perhaps used violence in their past lives to get what they want, used intimidation, used violence to get what they want. Man Up is meant to be a program that's about controlling those types of emotions and rising above and being a bigger man than that. And so, he's encouraging them to return into that cycle of using violence and intimidation to get their way. They've, preyed on vulnerable communities, used the idea of this program that's going to help our people, use that kōrero to justify their existence in certain spaces like courtrooms to advertise their programs and things like that. And now just using people as his like personal mercenary squad. It's disgusting. Shame on Brian Tamaki. I say, hey, I've seen Man Up in a few communities and I think they do some good mahi. It has to be said that they do some good mahi. Because what is it about? It's about men looking at themselves and questioning what they see. That's pretty much what Man Up is about. We can do those kinds of things without it being led by this cult-like figure, Brian Tamaki. People can heal, have those important conversations about what it means to be a man in today's society. We can all man up and have that conversation without this cult leader who's not only, pocketing all the profits from these programs, but encouraging people to revisit these cycles of abuse and violence. So,
and you say they do some good work, and it's like pretty much any organization that's given funding from the government to put back into our community will inevitably end up with some good work. This is something I've wanted to talk about for a while. Just because an organization gets funding from the government and is therefore able to do some good work in the community doesn't mean that they were the best organization to get the funding in the first place. Because for the same amount of funding, a different organization can do so much better work. So I think in general, I clicked something.
oh no, don't.
I clicked something.
I got it. I got it.
Now
I got it.
reading comments.
Don't worry,
How
I got it.
interesting.
That's cool.
Oh, cool.
Gotta
Good to
watch
know.
those fingers.
Yeah, I'm dangerous. I got warned before this started. Kappa, I'm gonna move on.
Kappa.
So the government wants to cut the living wage requirement for cleaners, security, and catering jobs hired by the government. So people who clean after and provide security and provide food for our politicians don't want them to be paid living wage. Despite them taking in, raking in all the money that they get paid, they don't want the people that look after them to be paid a living wage. Absolutely agree with A2 Union calling it heartless. The one thing that I wanted to highlight in this was Nicola Willis saying, oh, don't worry, there's still going to be a working for families and accommodation supplement that you can get through WINS. So they're like, oh yeah, we're going to cut your wages, but don't worry, you can still get a top up from WINS. That's such ridiculous logic, and it highlights how National doesn't want to end welfare dependency. They want to increase welfare dependency. It's just they want to also, torture us and send an ideological message about our worthlessness at the same time. And so, they're cutting it and then at the same time saying, it's okay, you can go on WINS. But I thought your whole thing was how we should just get jobs so that we don't have to go on WINS. Now you're saying that we might have full-time jobs and still need to get supplemented by WINS. And it just, the added money through all of that bureaucracy, having to go through WINS, someone checking your application, all of that is money. All of that is wasted money when you could just be getting a living wage. It's ridiculous that everyone's wage isn't a living wage. Like it's
insane.
How are we all just as a society are like, oh yeah, that's fine to have a minimum wage. That's below living wage. Like you're meant to just live below the ability of being able to live. What's the logic? People, we need to stop accepting the story about our own worthlessness and just put up with this bull. And actually, it's kind of what my next story is about. Maybe I'm not ready for it yet. But that's kind of the story of Labour in a way.
Okay, but before we move, because we said we'd answer live partai, let's address Missy. Tēnā koe, Missy. She's wondering she doesn't understand why Destiny's Church was supporting apartheid Israel.
Okay.
Would you like to address that one first, Samah?
Sure. Can we go on the two faces?
Oh, ka pai.
So it's a really good question. And from the relationships that we have documented in a couple of episodes ago between the Free Speech Union and Destiny Church, where they've defended their pro-Israel agitators at these anti-genocide rallies, they've defended them in court. They've gone to the Independent Police Conduct Authority to complain about the police arresting these pro-Israel agitators. It shows me that there is some kind of relationship between Destiny Church and these outfits like the Free Speech Union, who's a hardcore Zionist outfit, by the way, because it's got David Kuman, who's a co-founder of the Israeli Institute, and because of everything that the Free Speech Union has done and said. And so Destiny Church, as far as I'm concerned, and I don't think I have evidence to prove this claim, but in my opinion, and from everything that I've seen and based on the factual evidence that we do have, is basically like a for-hire militia that works for the interests of lobby groups. And you've seen them attack our rainbow community, and you've seen them attack our anti-genocide community.
Yeah, and just our protest community in general. Like, there was I think it was after Budget Day, when Te Pāti Māori and others organised a kākoi activation, which, caused some delays on the motorway, as these disruptive actions are meant to do. And then after that, we saw Brian Tamaki run his, that you're not allowed to fly any flag other than the New Zealand flag, which was funny because then at his rally meeting, they had like Trump flags. And so like just ridiculousness. But, it was an anti-tinoranga tiratanga activation. Because, we're just seeing our beautiful tinoranga tiratanga flags everywhere. And of course, our he whakaputanga te kara, which I prefer actually, e hoa ma. We're seeing those everywhere. And so they had to respond to that, and they had to try and give some energy to the New Zealand flag, Union Jack flag. But of course, as well, it's from my perspective, it's to get in the minds of the public that protesters are annoying.
Yeah, and with that
they're kind of nonsensical as well. They're like, what do you mean only New Zealand flags, but then you're okay with Trump flags being at your rally? Like the hypocrisy of it. But also just this idea that yes, people are going to protest, and they did the haka, of course. They're always weaponizing and diminishing our haka. They used our haka to, as I say, diminish it, to diminish protests, to make people annoyed, and to make it seem nonsensical. So, like you say, a militia, mercenary group for hire to encourage the narratives of these right-wing lobby groups who are trying to cut down, like, oppress our rights, our rights to protest, as Samah was saying, their engagement with the Free Speech Union and with that report that we talked about in one of the previous episodes from the IPCA. Destiny's Church and the Free Speech Union have been working together quite closely, I would say, into what has led to this report, which is going to be one of the biggest clampdowns or attacks on our rights to protest.
Yeah. And with that, example that you gave of Destiny Church going on the motorway, they're now using that in that same report you're talking about to try and ban protests from going on critical infrastructure like motorways, like the Hikoi did. So they're using Destiny Church to bring in these clampdowns on protests. So definitely they serve that purpose as well. And, like you say, it's also to confuse people about what protest is. Like they kept calling the storming of that library where they were going to do that drag storytime reading as a protest. That's not a protest, fam. That's not a protest. Storming a library to try and disrupt a drag storytime event is not a protest. It's hate speech. It's religious extremism.
Yeah.
is what it is. You know, there are many ways to describe it, and protest is not one that I would use. So they're confusing the idea of what protest is.
Exactly. Like when they said, oh, it's okay to protest. It's, you know, hey, I like protests, but not like that. That's a bit far. It's like, that's not a protest. But also as well, religious extremism, that would be another link with Destiny's Church and
Israel.
And the Zionist entity of Israel. You know, this idea that New Zealand is a Christian country, that is something that Destiny's Church likes to push. And through that, we've seen a lot of Islamophobia, people outside mosques and whatnot, especially after the Christchurch shooting, you know, on their megaphones, repeating this idea that New Zealand is a Christian country. And so there is that commonality there as well, that it draws in a common crowd of people who are evangelical towards Christianity. You know, and that's why as well you've seen Julian Bachelor team up with Destiny's Church, because they have that evangelical Christian commonality. Yes. But as well, you know, Missy, I would just say, what makes you think that Destiny's Church wouldn't support apartheid Israel? Perhaps you have the wrong perception of what Destiny's Church is, maybe. But thank you for the partai, and hopefully that answered your question.
I think it was more of a generic, more of a general question, because it is interesting the way that they have jumped in with that. But I think you know, what it does highlight is the way that all of the same people that agree on destroying our environment, on attacking our rainbow community, on attacking our workers, on attacking Māori, all of these people are also supporters of apartheid Israel. There is that commonality among them all. And it's like every single time they're transphobe, you look at their profile, they're also a Zionist. These ideologies of domination are just all deeply interrelated. And for Brian Tamaki to try and brainwash his people that some people are better than others, well, there's no better way to put that into their brain than what's happening in Israel, because what Israel's doing to Palestinians is only acceptable if you accept that some people are inferior to other people. It's only acceptable if you're okay with Palestinians being treated as less than human. And I think he needs his people to believe that some people are less than human in order to justify all the other ideologies.
Killed her. Yeah, killed her. Nailed it.
Okay. You're biased.
Isn't she amazing?
Okay. Back to the thing. So this was, I just thought was amusing, I guess. But, you know, so the school lunch saga continues. They continue to fail. And after Libel Group was, what's it called, liquidated or whatever, they had to start importing food from Australia to feed our kids. So, you know, getting even further than locally made from local businesses, then it's locally made, but international businesses, and now it's internationally made and sent into feeding our kids. Ridiculous in itself, but just to make it more ridiculous, apparently, they're not even meals. They're importing entrees. These things that you put on the side of your main, you know, on the side of your patties or sausages,
and
or
you
whatever
gotta,
you like to eat.
like 3 of them to turn it
by
into a
itself,
main.
yeah, or like, you know, sometimes because they make a vegan one now, chucking a broccoli in it or something to make it filling. But no, just that, empty calories pretty much. And it's funny, I saw David Seymour say, you know, our priority is nutrition and efficiency. It's not true. Nutrition only got 15% of the total tally of priorities for their school lunch. So it's blatantly not true that they cared about nutrition. I wish journalists would just bring up basic public information such as the tallies that they offered and just answer him back like that's not true. Okay. Next thingy-mabob I've got is Nick Mowbray. So he's by far the richest person in this country. He overtook Graham Hart. Both of these men are donors to National Act and New Zealand First. This guy, I don't know if he donated to New Zealand First, but he definitely donated to National and Act. And he retweeted this. No, Helen, the whole basic for DEI policies is a lie. Socioeconomic disparities are not caused by systemic discrimination. They are caused by innate group differences across factors like average IQ. DEI doesn't cure systemic discrimination. It is systemic discrimination. Now, I think, you know, this is pretty emblematic of the path that these racists are taking this argument on, which is, we don't need anything to address the imbalanced outcomes within colonial society. We have imbalanced outcomes because certain people are inferior. That's the argument that they're making here. These people who didn't, who are facing discrimination in the job space are not facing discrimination. It's actually because they have low IQ. And so this is what the richest person in this country is tweeting. They're openly sharing these white supremacist narratives. And you also see this on, the Taxpayers Union and the Free Speech Union. They're getting closer and closer, just openly saying this. Look, you guys are doing bad in society because you're innately inferior, not because we treat you any different or because we're racist. And this is the outcome of the discussion about the Treaty Principles Bill and all that stuff about, the treaty gravy train. They're trying to say, you're on the treaty gravy train, you're getting all these payouts from government, and yet you're still on the bottom. You're still on the bottom socioeconomically. That must mean that you are inherently inferior. That's the logical extreme of their argument, because they're unable to accept that theirs is a colonial white supremacist system that they're forcing us to live under. Okay, now I wanted to address something. So we made this post about Labour being national light. And a couple of people were like, oh, this is, misinformation, because Labour just said that they would they would get rid of what's harmful and keep anything that's not harmful. And when it comes to the fast track bill, because Labour explicitly said we're not going to get rid of the fast track. Well, no, they didn't. I'm sorry. I need to correct myself. Labour refused to say that they would get rid of the fast track. Instead, they said, look, it just needs some better environmental protections. And then they guided us to their own fast track 2020 to say, look, we're not against fast track. We had our own fast track. So let's take a look at their 2020 fast track. And when we go and have a look at their consented forms, we see that theirs is not a legacy that we can trust. They're not, when they say we're going to bring in, environmental protections, we can look at their own fast track to say if that's true, that they will have reasonable fast track protections for the environment. And I just wanted to bring up just this one singular project because, what we find is that Hapu and iwi have spoken out about Labour's fast track, and they warned about the precedent it would set. And we need to be talking about that as well when we're criticizing the fast track. So we see this comment from the Te Korowai o Ngā Ruahine Trust, and it was their comment on the Kapuni Green Hydrogen Project. This project is basically a giant, potentially the biggest wind farm project in the country, and it was to create energy to make urea. Urea is then used for extremely harmful, this whole thing is run by AgriBalance Nutrients, which is one of two fertilizer companies in this country. They produce extremely harmful nitrogen fertilizer, which is used by predominantly the dairy industry, and it hurts our soil and it hurts our waterways. So Te Korowai o Ngā Ruahine Trust responded to this, and look, the absolute first thing that they say in their comment is, quote, there have been serious misgivings about the entire fast-track consenting process under which this application is being processed. This has meant past and current Treaty of Waitangi claims settlement are in effect ignored. This is seen as a slap in the face to all those who fought with dignity and patience to secure settlement provisions capable of advancing the cultural, social, environmental, and economic well-being of Ngā Ruahine. So this is them talking about Labour's fast track, right? It's eroding democratic processes and the ability for iwi to give consultations because they're fast tracking consent, right? And in this particular case, it didn't even have anything to do with COVID. So even though they called it a COVID-19 fast track consenting process, this is just an agri industry initiative. Te Runga o Ngāti Ruanui also talked about this, and they warned explicitly the expert consenting panel must be aware of the precedent effect it could be making through granting this application. So we have iwi complaining about how anti-democratic Labour's fast-track consenting processes, complaining about the precedent it could set. And by the way, they still consented this project. And now Ngā Ruahine, Greenpeace, and some other bodies are actually taking it to the United Nations. They tried the court, they took it to High Court, and then they lost. They took it to the Court of Appeal, and they lost. And now they're going to the United Nations. And they say humiliating New Zealand is the only thing that we have left to do. I bring this up because, you know, if we're going to criticize Labour's fast-track process, in my opinion, we also need to acknowledge that, I may have said Labour.
Yeah, if we're going to criticize National, absolutely, we've got to be consistent.
And understand that Labour is not to be trusted when they say, we'll keep the fast-track, but we'll add environmental protections. Well, are they going to be as weak as your last environmental protections for your last fast-track? Because those were not good enough. And, you know, I want to continue with this theme that Labour sets us up for what we get from from National. So this news story that National has approved the killing of Kiwis for transmission gully. That's what it is, right?
You tell me, you're telling the story.
Oh, Mount Messenger.
There
I'm
we
so
go.
sorry.
There we
Mount
go.
Messenger. Mount Messenger bypass. So they've approved killing of Kiwis from Mount Messenger bypass. They try and justify it by saying, oh, you know, we're building these sanctuaries and making sure that we have lots of Kiwis in this other area. And of course, conservation and other groups are saying that's not how it works. You can't just kill a Kiwi here and make sure you breed a Kiwi over here. We have to protect them in their habitats. Absolutely, we need to criticize the government for, you know, the destruction they're doing for their bypass, but same thing. Labour also set us up for this. Waka Kotahi used builder's foam to fill in potential bat roosts for the same Mount Messenger bypass back in 2021. It's the same thing. And we actually talked about it all the time. So I've actually got an old video of that.
Oh,
Back when the ALL Report was all about animals. So anyone who is new to the show, we used to do the ALL Report. It's unlisted, as you can see. We've taken it off YouTube, but we used to do these ALL Reports, but just about issues that covered animals. I personally really liked this show. I thought it was a good show. Anyway,
the vegans, honestly, the reason why it didn't really continue is because the vegans didn't appreciate our more intersectional view around animal rights, and that, you know, animal rights isn't just about animals. Animal rights for us essentially is about looking after those who are on the bottom rung of society, because that's where animals sit. You know, like we insult people and call them animals. That's how low we look at animals. We don't even see animals as victims, you know? And anyway, that's our philosophy really. And we want to lift everything, including our whenua. You know, our whenua is even probably more below animals. But anyway, that's always been our philosophy, that we need to look after those who are purposefully oppressed and at the bottom of the bottom rung of the ladder. But to be honest, we've got a lot of work that we need to do in the vegan space, the animal rights space. Its origins really are around collective liberation. But it does pass over into that realm of being, you know, individualistic. It encourages that type of view, which I think is great, you know, because from an activist perspective, protesting perspective, that understanding that you can have a really impactful, that you can be impactful as an individual, you know, boycotting animal products. For me, that's an incredibly powerful thing. And I think it's a good thing to talk about and to understand. But anyway, I digress. I don't want to hate on our vegan whānau too much, but I think that was why we didn't continue with this series. Anyway, let's watch this. I'm like cringing because I'm looking at my old self.
I think it's great. Okay, so this is a short little video we made about these filling the bat roosts back then.
Memo released under the Official Information Act shows the Transport Agency blocked potential bat roosts with building foam, even though they've repeatedly stated otherwise. These bats, or peka peka, are Aotearoa's only native mammals and are critically endangered. The project, which aims to build a bypass on State Highway 3 in Taranaki, has yet to be given resource consent. It's said that it will provide safety improvements and save motorists 4 to 6 minutes of driving time. In August, the agency said they'd found no bats or bat roosts and no sites suitable for bats were filled in. It's now become clear that, in fact, action was taken months ago to block off what they say are potential bat roosts, in a number of ways, including building foam. Marie Gibbs from the Potama Charitable Trust said it was disappointing that the agency was saying one thing and doing another, adding that it's concerning that they've actually gone into the ngahere and blocked up those bat holes right before winter. Emily Bailey, a spokesperson for Whenua Warriors, said up until last week they were still saying they might do it in the future, and then this memo says they've actually done it months ago. So how are we meant to believe anything they're saying? The conservation group had organised a 20,000 signature petition asking the Transport Minister to scrap the project. The agency said their previous statements could have been worded better, and DOC stood by their fellow government organisation, saying they were comfortable with measures the Transport Agency was taking to avoid disturbing bats. However, Emily Bailey said it was not in the bats' best interest, explaining that the agency is reducing the likelihood of bats being in the area in order to increase their chances of getting resource consent. In a time when we should be working hard to preserve our remaining habitats, government agencies continue to prioritise development over our precious ecosystems. For our final story, some...
Kapai.
Not bad, not bad, not bad.
So just showing this to show that for Mount Messenger bypass, they've had to be quite destructive the whole way through. It was Labour that started it. And now that National's continuing, we need to just keep in mind that if we go back to Labour, Labour's going to go back to doing the same, you know, like, but a little bit less. Like, so National might be actively killing the Kiwis and the bats, but Labour was filling their bat roosts, which is indirectly killing them anyway. And I feel like that's a really great analogy for the difference between National and Labour. While National will just punch you in the face and tell you that's what they're doing, Labour will just create the conditions where you will just get punched anyway, you know.
I think you said it the other day really well. It's National is there to prove to us people that we deserve Labour.
Yeah.
You know, because Labour is the system, the man. You know, when we talk about the colonial system that we live under, you know, that colonial system has been created by our crown government. And Labour have been a huge part of that. You know, I mean, Te Pāti Māori started because of policy from the Labour Party, for example. You know, we get too relaxed when Labour is in power. We, you know, and I understand, you know, they are the establishment party that is most likely to work with Māori. And in the last Labour term, they did do a lot of things for Māori. A lot of things got over the line, but of course, nothing enshrined to the point where it was safely there for us. It was all left up in the air and rolled back, and majority of things have been rolled back. They've even taken things further, this National Party. They're not just rolling things back, but they're digging even deeper. So, you know, nothing was really enshrined in terms of teaching people about Te Tiriti and enshrining, you know, nothing. And so, you know, we're just jumping back and forward, jumping back and forward. And my fear is that National is going to be so awful to us, as they are, that once we get Labour back, we're all just going to be like, oh, phew, great. Now we can all just chill out and don't have to go to any protests or anything like that anymore. But, yeah, I mean, you know, they lack transparency. They're not a grassroots organization. You know, they're led, you know, just why have they not introduced a capital gains tax? Zian brought it up before. Historically, house prices have risen more under Labour than National. I don't know if that's true. We might have to get fact checked on that one. But if that is true, that is insane, and it speaks to the favor that landlords have with Labour. Like, why have they not put forward a capital gains tax? These types of huge things.
They're reviewing it.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll
They're
see.
reviewing
We'll
it for
see.
the 17,000th time.
Yeah.
Um,
Anyway, we can't relax. You got to stay vigilant. E hoa.
and this next story is the same thing, you know. Labour has put out this press release and they're going hard on the school lunches and they say, we want to return to locally made school lunches. Like, I mean, I want to hear from y'all what you think about it. But for me, when I hear that, I think local providers, local food providers are providing lunches to their local community. And, you know, that's kind of what they're making out, like, because they're trying to capture this energy against Compass, which is a multinational food provider, right? But
Anti-foreigners. That's kind of a bit of a vibe.
a little bit, but when it comes to, you know, big giant, you know, the biggest caterer in the world, we can vibe with this, right? And I think they're trying to capture that energy, and they're saying, you know, sign our petition, we're going against this, and asking Luxon to return to locally made lunches. But I think that's extremely misleading from Labour, because look at this article about Labour's school lunches back in 2020. Commercial contractors win school lunch tender. And it says big companies have won most of the contracts to provide free school lunches next year, despite ministers' initial hopes that the scheme would create for small-scale community jobs. And then it goes on to say that of those giant corporations that they did give it to, Compass Group and Labelle, who's gone into liquidation, were offered contracts to provide for together what was 21,000 students in the country. So, you know, Labour is saying return to locally made school lunches. And if we did return to exactly what Labour had, we would have a few more local providers.
I'm looking at it and I'm like, technically kind of mostly true. But I hear what you're saying.
Some, they did have more local providers, because now what they've done is just monopolized it and asked the Compass Group and the other two entities to lead out all of the school lunches. Whereas for Labour, they did have others as well. It's just that they gave Compass Group and Labelle Group a contract as well, knowing that they were multinational massive companies that have had numerous complaints beforehand. So for them to now say return to locally made school lunches, but, you know, not acknowledging that they themselves also gave massive contract to the likes of Compass, I just find it a bit disingenuous. It kind of paints the illusion that before National we had only local providers for lunches, but that's not the case. We had massive corporations, including Compass.
You'll never hear them say things like, oh yeah, look, we hired Compass in the past too. But you know, we'll never hear them admit that they were the ones who encouraged or broke the ice and first brought in this group.
National had also been engaging with Compass before that.
Yeah, so encouraging it. You know, they gave further contracts to them.
And then from then, you know, all they did was basically expand the contract to these two corporations when National came in, so it was easier to do. But Labour definitely contracted them to provide school lunches, even though they had previously campaigned against them providing food for hospitals. And now they're talking about returning it. And it's like you say, you know, wearing us down under National so that we're okay with mostly big corporations providing our lunches, but some local providers as well, you know, being okay to go back to Labour, which was also beating us up, but just not quite as bad. And yeah, I mean,
okay, it would certainly be an improvement, right? Like, I don't want to, like, I feel like every time we give this anti-Labour spiel,
yeah, I'm like, don't bother.
vote for, well, hey, we shouldn't tell people who to vote for. Vote for who you want, for another disclaimer, eh? But how do we shift Labour? You empower the parties that are going to pull them in a particular direction, okay? Don't vote Labour thinking that you're going to change them from the inside. You know, we need to pressure them from the outside. So let's give power to the groups who are going to pull Labour where we need them to. Doesn't mean that we're completely anti-Labour and that we're going to go on some intense campaign to undermine, you know, the Labour Party. But it is just, it's a, you know, by doing what we are encouraging, by pulling them more
towards Te Pāti Māori and towards the Greens, we're actually going to strengthen Labour. There is a chance that there is a sector within, a faction within Labour that is screaming and crying out for the public to be asking for better, to be asking for more. And the way that we can encourage that energy and spur that on more, you know, we're not just going to totally abandon and belittle and lie or, like, you know, spread misinformation about Labour. That's not going to happen. But, you know, the way that we do it, the way that we pull them over is keep encouraging those stronger parties that are going to improve their policies. That's all.
Ka pai. All right, that's all for my stuff.
Ka pai. Okay, ka pai. Very good. Thank you for all of that. It's very informative information, Samah. Thank you very much. To get us started on talking about the Treaty Principles Bill. Now, I'm sorry, everyone.
Mike!
I apologize, everyone. Like, we should have downloaded this and played it ourselves, so we're not giving him a view, right? But we watch it with you so that you don't have to give them an individual view, right? So News Talk ZB. Mike Hoskins, he did his own little wrap up of the Treaty Principles Bill. It was terrible. We're going to listen to the whole thing.
The whole thing?
We're going to listen to the whole thing. So strap in, e hoama. And then we'll have a bit of a kōrero about that. But please think about what Mike says in this video. Tell us what you think about it. And then we might further just tease things out and explore things from there. But enjoy, e hoama. Here we go.
Boy.
The Mike Hosking Breakfast, 6 to 9 weekdays on News Talk ZB.
G'day there. We should give a shout out, or at least take a couple of moments to read Lyric Waireri Smith's account of the Treaty Settlement Bill submissions. Now, she works for the spin-off. She sat through, it seems, virtually all of the 80 hours of submissions and cast a series of observations in an article by way of a 50 Things I Learned list. Now, one of the things she learned, in fact it was number 37, was a lack of interest from the media. Now, you may recall at the start of this particular process, it was a mad, wall-to-wall, blow-by-blow account of what was one of the, you can insert your own word, the country's most contentious or outrageous or heinous acts of the modern age. Fast forward a few days, she was the only one left in the room along with Māori TV. Now, there's a lesson in that. On one hand, you can mount, I suppose, an argument that the media is so trimmed down these days, resource for lengthy procedures is limited. You can also argue, and this is my argument as it turns out, the media are too magpie-ish and fascinate themselves with shiny things, lose interest too quickly, and as such enhance their reputations as fly-by-nighters interested in clicks, not knowledge. Cover it properly or don't cover it at all might be a good guiding idea. Now, some of the 50 things are a bit lightish in nature and some, and this is not a criticism of the piece. In fact, we should be grateful someone bothered to give us this overarching insight, hence it behooves us to actually absorb it. But some basically tell you what you already thought you knew. Namely, a lot of people turned up, as you would expect, to hate on it, thus drawing into question the whole submission process. In other words, what was the point? Most importantly for me was my suspicion it was confirmed that there remains great debate over the treaty and its principles, and as such, David Seymour was more than right to do what he has done. The high and mighty turned up and basically argued with each other. The treaty is not settled or anywhere close to being settled. It is not defined. You can find scholars and lawyers and experts who will tell you one thing with full vim, full vigour and full eloquence, and then you can find another equally qualified person who will say exactly the opposite. Hence, we are where we are, and where we are, sadly, is at, for now, the end of the road, because the bill, as we all know, will be voted down, which is a shame, given, as Ms Smith's list surely shows, a definitive understanding is well and truly overdue.
The Mike Hosking Breakfast, 6 to 9 weekdays.
The Mike Hosking Breakfast. Man.
That's so hype, eh?
Sorry we had to do that to you all.
So hype.
Man, so where do we begin from there? Eh? Like, for me, the thing that has struck me the most is that, and good on the Greens for bringing up the question of Māori sovereignty. They've repeatedly in the House asked if Luxon still thinks that Māori ceded sovereignty, because that's something that Luxon has said. And for me, that is the question that we're meant to be grappling with right now. What is Māori sovereignty? Did Māori cede sovereignty? You know, the fact that that one is still coming up is a pain in the ass, considering the Waitangi Tribunal confirmed that through signing Te Tiriti, Māori never ceded, okay? So if we never ceded our sovereignty through Te Tiriti o Waitangi, it calls into claim the government's entire, the entire premise that the government has that they are sovereign. If we never ceded, then where does their right to be sovereign actually come from? Where does it actually come from? That's where it all boils down to. Any legal case, if we take it through the courts, the government can be questioned. Where does their foundation actually come from? It's meant to come from Te Tiriti o Waitangi. Anyway, this whole concept, the idea that Māori are sovereign, that we have our tino rangatiratanga, it's such a, it is uncharted new territory. Often we have David Seymour and people saying, where has blah blah blah, where he's often looking overseas for examples of whatever, and we don't need to do that because of course we have a unique situation here in Aotearoa, but we need to start actually being honest and pursuing it to figure things out. We actually have to dive in and start experimenting to figure out how things are going to work. That's the only way we're going to be able to do it.
Which is how they're pretending this treaty principle submissions process went. That it was just a nice exploration of ideas. And that's how Mike Hosking is trying to say that it was a win and that David Seymour has been vindicated. Because obviously we haven't all agreed. And here we're able to hash it out and discuss it.
Crazy. And because he's saying, you can find an expert on both sides. It's like when John Key was confronted by some evidence from freshwater ecologist Mike Joy.
Classic.
And this international, I think it was an American and Australian interviewer, interviewing John Key. The interviewer's like, this looks really bad from this freshwater ecologist. Your waterways seem to be in a really bad state in New Zealand. And John Key infamously is just like, wow, he's just one scientist. They're like lawyers. You can just find another one to get another one's opinion.
Yeah.
But on this matter, when it comes to Māori sovereignty, we've already had the government's own Waitangi Tribunal conclude on Māori sovereignty. You know what I mean? The colonial institution of our country, the government, their own agency, which is their primary job is to understand this kaupapa. They concluded themselves in Te Paparahi o Te Raki Stage 1 report that Ngāpuhi, and through extension of that, I would say all Māori, it was concluded that through signing Te Tiriti, we did not cede our sovereignty. Anyway, he says that there are like or equal experts on either side that will say the contrasting view, but that's just not true. Even if we just look at it through those who submitted in support of the Treaty Principles Bill, you have people like John Robinson, who has some history working as a statistician, looking at Māori statistics. And he's written a couple of books that have been published by Tross Publishing, which is an infamously problematic publisher. It's where everyone goes to publish their works if others reject it on the grounds of, this is a little bit too offensive or a little bit too racist or whatever. Everyone goes to Tross Publishing for that. So this guy, John Robinson, he's written a couple books for the most infamously racist publisher. He has no real expertise as a historian, and even on top of that, these people have no expertise or experience working with Māori communities, speaking to Māori who actually fill in the blanks. From a historical point of view, all of our histories have been recorded by Pākehā. In terms of written history books and things like that, it's very Pākehā dominated space. The only way to really understand Māori history and kōrero tuku iho, kōrero, conversations, wisdom that's handed down to us through the generations.
Yeah.
That's the only way that you're going to understand the Māori side of that story. And all of these people who submitted in support of the Treaty Principles Bill, they don't have that experience. Not only do they not have the academic credentials to be on par with the historians who agree with the Waitangi Tribunal's finding. There's only one historian that I can think of who partially disagreed with the Waitangi Tribunal's Te Paparahi o Te Raki Stage 1 report. And the only thing that he disagreed on was a specific in the report. He also said, yeah, Māori never ceded sovereignty. I'm not going to say the guy's name because he's considered a bit of a problematic dude, but he is a guy that is often referenced by the anti-tiriti movement as a historian who has academic credentials who disagrees with the Waitangi Tribunal. But you dig into it and you understand, you see that his words are being used out of context, that he only agreed with a small, like, kind of irrelevant part in terms of that debate around Māori sovereignty. And so, you know, it just doesn't exist. That expert opinion that says that exists on, but anyway, before I forget, the problematic thing for me is we're meant to be talking about Māori sovereignty. We're meant to be talking about constitutional transformation. But instead, the kōrero has been diluted to talking about not the current treaty principles, which are problematic in themselves, but in fact, someone's new interpretation of the treaty principles. We've become so disconnected from the actual conversation that we've been trying to have. Like, it is a common conversation for us to have to criticize the current principles. There are current principles that have been here that predate the current treaty principles bill, right? And the reason why we criticize them is because they also don't match up with what it says in Te Tiriti. They are a compromise that we've come to because first the Waitangi Tribunal was set up and they were primarily guided by the English document, the Treaty of Waitangi. Because of course, you know, they're a colonial institute. You know, when the Waitangi Tribunal was set up in 1975, it was against the wishes of Māori, as a matter of fact. You know, so it's another broken crown-based, you know, half-baked solution that's not by Māori for Māori in the first place, right? So there's all of this energy that already exists in terms of criticizing the Waitangi Tribunal and the treaty principles from Māori. There's already all of that energy that exists around, you know.
They're trying to capture that pre-existing energy.
They're riding that wave. And when they ride that wave, they are able to say like, oh, it's confusing. Oh, we don't know what the truth is. I've been hearing over here and over there. And so we've just gone so far. When the article that Mike Hoskins is talking about, it's interesting that he brought up that article. I was thinking maybe we should go through some of but there's so many. But in this article, maybe we'll just find it. I'm not sure what number it is. Maybe if we search principles, it might come up. So here, most of us can generally agree that the principles laid out in the Treaty Principles Bill do not accurately reflect what was written in the treaty or Te Tiriti. That's not the discussion. It is, she says, we can generally agree that it does not accurately reflect. No. We are 100% sure that the principles laid out in Act's bill are not even remotely close. The Waitangi Tribunal has come out and said that flat out, that they're a complete misrepresentation.
Yeah, that's pretty weak. Do not accurately reflect is weak.
Because what she's saying here, she's running off of the energy that has already existed for a very long time. The common mainstream held view by Māori that the current treaty principles do not accurately reflect Te Tiriti o Waitangi. But that narrative from that has been imported onto Act's current bill. And I'm not saying, you know, I'm not trying to shame the writer of this article or anything like that. I think it's how the trap works in terms of these groups who hitch themselves onto something that's already moving. The wave was already there. And that's why I believe they chose to criticize treaty principles. Because if they had just come out outright and said, let's have a discussion about Māori sovereignty, let's really get to the bottom of this Waitangi Tribunal report of Te Paparahi o Te Raki around Māori ceding sovereignty. Let's have that conversation and tease that out and really understand that as a nation. They didn't want to have that conversation. Instead, they want to frame it in all sorts of ways. You know, they want to frame it as like special rights. Hey, that's been an interesting one. The way that the ACT Party has been trying to frame, I mean, for me, it's just a complete misunderstanding of, well, lack of understanding, ignorance of decolonization. This idea, you know, that our current system is not a system that has just sprung up out of the earth and naturally exists. It's not the default of our existence if we had just let everything happen. It's a man-made system that has been put here. That's why we give it a label and name it the colonial system. Because there is another system that should be existing here, but the colonial system has been imported and placed over the top, and it is the new default. So much so is it the default that we don't refer to it normally, right, as the colonial system. It sounds a bit academic-y and wordy and like vague and strange and detached from reality. But the reason why we call it the colonial system is if we don't name it, then we're accepting it as the default. If you don't call it out for what it is, this imposed, man-made, artificial system, then it does become the default and it sinks into our psyche and we accept it.
That's the idea behind the word homogeneity.
Homogeneity.
Homogeneity or homogeneous system is a system that hides the fact that it is taking up, you know, that it is the norm of society. It's hiding the fact that it is the dominant culture. And
right.
So we're talking about the special rights argument?
I was just touching on it. Yeah. So let me, you kick us off in terms of that special rights kōrero. Like, where does it come from? Special rights framing, positive, what is it called? Positive, tick, 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 tick. First one to get it wins a prize.
Affirmation, like,
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
what is the
yeah,
word? Positive.
it's not positive, but yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Tip of the tongue.
But yeah, this idea that any reparations or any
Reparational
effort
mahi.
to address discrimination is, in fact, itself discriminatory
Yeah.
and is a special right. And where it started, well, I don't know exactly where it started historically, but I know that this idea that people asking for justice as a special right has been used against descendants of slaves in America, has been used against anti-apartheid activists in South Africa. They use the same sentiments that you asking for justice is asking for a special right. What's interesting about that narrative is just how many people have fallen for it and have said, yeah, that's right. Māori do have special rights, you know? And I find that a little bit concerning because we're giving into their narratives when we should be questioning their narratives. And, you know, with the special right argument, they're saying that the whole special right argument is looking at it from the perspective that Māori must first live under the colonial system. And so they're saying, oh, you want special laws, policies, and regulations from the colonizer. But that's perverting what tino rangatiratanga is about. That's not what Te Tiriti o Waitangi is about. Te Tiriti o Waitangi it does explicitly say that everyone has the same rights and responsibilities under the colonial system. They're right about that fact. Te Tiriti does say that everyone under the colonial system should be treated the same as everyone else under the colonial system.
Essentially, paraphrased, but essentially.
Paraphrased. But it also says that Māori have the right to have their sovereignty. And that's the part that we should be talking about. That's what this whole conversation is meant to be about. When we're talking about constitutional transformation, we're talking about the fact that we need to honour Te Tiriti o Waitangi and allow Māori, stop denying Māori.
Get out of the way.
Get out of the way and stop stopping and denying Māori from being able to exercise their tino rangatiratanga. So when they say special rights, they are first presuming that these rights, laws, responsibilities are being divvied out by the colonial legal system. when actually Māori are asking to exist outside of that colonial legal system. And so from the beginning, they've limited the conversations, confines, that actually erases the idea of self-determination to begin with. And so we're all having this discussion about, what is and isn't ethical within the colonial system.
Mm-hmm.
And, this is an issue about our conceptualization of colonialism. And a lot of people a lot of really, really awesome, great people, great advocates for Māori have gone in there and argued for equity. The fact that Māori have lower statistics in pretty much across the range, right? In health statistics, Māori die 7 years younger. They are more likely to be imprisoned and so on and so forth. And they've said as a response to that, the colonial system needs to provide measures so that those statistics are more even across the board, so that everyone's being imprisoned in the same percentages, so that everyone's living in poverty across the same percentages and so on and so forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
I get that argument.
Mm-hmm.
I get it as a band-aid. I get it as a fact that Māori currently do live under the colonial system. And so we cannot allow them to just die so many years younger while they're living under the colonial system. I get that. And so I get things like the Māori Health Authority, and I get things like trying to address that inequity. But that's not what Te Tiriti o Waitangi is about. Te Tiriti o Waitangi is not about addressing discrimination within the colonial system. It's about Māori living under their own self-governance outside of colonial law. So, if we want to conceptualize it, here's the colonial system. I like to picture it like a dome. Oh, and by the way, I got stung by a wasp, so fat arm. That's why. Again, got stung.
I was like, don't worry, your hand's not gonna be on the stream.
So we've got this colonial dome, and we're all living under it, right? We're all under this dome. Okay, I'm the microphone.
We're all under the dome. Kapa.
Yeah. And they're like, hey, under this dome, some people are doing badly. And the colonizers are like, well, that's not our fault. We give you all equal opportunities. Of course they don't.
Mm-hmm.
It's an inherently racist colonial system. But that's their argument. And then we argue back, no, that's not true. We're doing badly under this colonial system. But all the while, we're stuck discussing our life under this colonial system, when really Te Tiriti o Waitangi is about this existing, but also this. I need to put it in the camera as a different dome.
This.
Also, yeah, over here. But also this existing over here, something different, a different dome, a different set of tikanga or laws or, governance and policies and everything. And so they've narrowed the discussion by making it about special rights. And every time we even use that terminology, rights,
mm-hmm.
rights are divvied out the way that we understand them anyway. The way that we understand rights and the way they're talking about them, they're divvied out by the colonizer. The colonizer makes the laws. And so they're saying, should Māori have special laws under the colonial laws? No, Māori are trying to get out of colonial governance, to get out from under colonial laws. And so in that way, and I think this is a deliberate ploy to change the conversation from being one about constitutional transformation, from being one about talking about Māori self-determination under an equal but different governance. They've perverted it to now talking about can we and should we make shifts, small tiny changes within the colonial system to try and make life slightly better within this current system.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they do that on purpose to limit our imagination. So that when we're talking about Te Tiriti o Waitangi, we just think of, should doctors think about people's ethnicities when they're deciding who to give operations to first? They want to limit the conversation to being within the confines of us all living under the New Zealand sovereign state. They don't want us to have the bigger constitutional transformation discussion. So I feel like they've preempted it.
Yeah.
They've known it's coming.
Yeah.
Mātiki Mai has set the target date of 2040.
Mm-hmm.
So they know it's coming.
Mm-hmm.
Our fight for constitutional transformation. And they've preempted it by saying, this is about race-based policies and erasing completely what Tino Rangatiratanga is about.
I mean, we even saw it from if you look at the ACT Party's Treaty Principles Bill, their redefining of Article 2 to essentially change tino ranga tiratanga to simply mean possession. You know, tino ranga tiratanga is an authority that exists outside of the Crown's authority, because tino ranga tiratanga is that utmost authority. Tino ranga tiratanga. You know, rangatira is a strong enough word as it is. Rangatira the chiefliness, the, you know, rangatira, and then tino rangatira, tino being an amplifier, tino rangatira. They've tried to simply reframe it to mean possession within the colonial system. And I think the thing about it is that the government, the Crown, they're not able to entertain discussions about true tino rangatiratanga. This is why a lot of people say it's a waste of time for us to be pursuing actual tino rangatiratanga under the Crown. Under the Crown system, it's a waste of time because the system is set up completely around itself being absolute. That it's a supreme system. So it's not going to do as we want it to, be truthful about Māori sovereignty and have those brave conversations about tino rangatiratanga. But, you know, as I said before, the Waitangi Tribunal was originally set up using the English text. And it was a lot of hard work to make grounds in that space, in the Waitangi Tribunal space, and in terms of the Crown acknowledging breaches of te tiriti, a hard-fought road. And the only way for a lot of our people in terms of making gains for our people, as you said, you know, we are under the colonial system. It must be accepted that we are all currently living under a system that has been forced onto us. And when you think about the whakapapa of the Waitangi Tribunal, initially it only ran with the English text, which of course within it says that Māori ceded sovereignty. You know, so that was that's the baseline that we're working with. That's the foothold that we have to launch ourselves from. So, you know, chicken or the egg kind of thing, you know, who did it first? Who was the one to make that the central part of the conversation first? Who knows? Not trying to accuse anyone of keeping us necessarily locked in that space, but they understand that history. You know, they understand how cemented within our current system, within our current mentality, our understandings of these things. All of those things are really cemented, and they're trying to keep the discussion there. Talking about, as you say, rights and everything within the colonial system. You guys getting some type of special something within the colonial system. But really what we're talking about, like you say, is a different parallel system that also can exist. You know, the colonial worldview is so supremacist, it's so supremacy based. They can't even conceptualize an alternative system.
Yeah, that's a normalization.
And I think, you know, it's normal, it's forgivable. When I started understanding te tiriti and understanding my rights as tangata whenua under te tiriti, I thought to myself, oh, really? That's a bit out there. Isn't like the government absolute? You know, isn't the government absolute? And I was like, whoa, what if I get in trouble? What if the police what if they did it? But you know, it's a very liberating thing. It's a very empowering thing to understand that actually all of the powers that the government gets is just because everyone in that house has come together and has agreed to it being so. You know, there's not any omnipotent godly power that has said, okay, colonial system, that's what it's going to be in New Zealand. You guys get the colonial system, and that's that. Nature has decided that you get the colonial system. Yeah. That's not how it is. It's just a completely unnatural supremacist system that has been, you know, oppressing us since the very beginning. You know, the current government that we have, it locked Māori out of voting in the first elections that we had because of Māori needing to own title under own land under an individual title. Because of that colonial foundations that our government has, and we all know how slow things take to improve. just like with the Waitangi Tribunal initially just being run off the English document, you know, it's such a difficult place to have that conversation of tino rangatiratanga, I guess, is something that we need to acknowledge. And that's why a lot of people say that you shouldn't bother pursuing tino rangatiratanga under the government. Like Te Pāti Māori, they're on a lost cause crusade trying to achieve tino rangatiratanga under the colonial system. But for me, them just bringing up the conversation, that's the point of why,
and I think that's their
why
point.
they're there.
I think that's their whole point, is that they are just trying to popularize the conversation. And that's kind of what I see the Greens there being for as well, just to empower activists on the ground, right? And to empower our narratives. They have all the, you know, well, not, they have a lot more opportunities to present ideas to the media, to make it through, to break through the mainstream. And so that's really important. And it's just important to have that in the house. Like, it's really powerful when you do watch Parliament TV. And it's just these colonizers, and these days especially, they're very openly being racist and saying Māori should just get over it and so on and so forth. And it feels really powerful to have people in there from the Greens and Te Pāti Māori to just be able to stand up from the heart of colonization, you know?
It's very powerful.
And break through the haka, and, you know, for them to be sent to the Privileges Committee over it, despite the whole world celebrating it, is interesting, isn't it?
Like you say, yeah, that's why they're there. You know, talking about the dome, the colonial dome. The colonial dome wants to restrict us to not seeing anything but the dome, right? And Te Pāti Māori are doing things in the house that make you think it's impossible to achieve what you're trying to achieve, but it gives us a glimpse. It breaks the trance. You know, we're all under a colonial trance. And I don't want to get too airy-fairy with it, but you know what I mean. Like, the reality that we all perceive, as we say, it's, you know, it's not a natural thing. We have a current system that influences our understandings of the world. So we're all thinking on a trajectory that the dome has confined us to. And when you get Te Pāti Māori doing their haka and things like that in the house, and talking about tino rangatiratanga on a more grander scale, that allows us just to slightly pop that dome just a little bit, to see beyond the dome, break that trance, to spark our imaginations. And for me, it's really, really important that we understand that our current world, whether you want to call it the colonial system or whatever, you know, call it the man, you know, the system, the man system, whatever you want to call it, it was put there by human beings. And it's something that we can change if we get organized. It's something that we can change. But we need to be able to imagine it first. We're trapped in the confines of only viewing things in a certain way, that the colonial system is the be all end all. And that's its whole game.
And you'll see that everything they do is just trying to keep us trapped in that conversation. And when you have news people disagreeing with each other on both sides, and, you know, Noam Chomsky talked about this, about narrowing the limits of the conversation. You'll never have someone who's disagreeing, but disagreeing with the whole concept of it, you know, and going outside of these narrow confines of existing within the colonial system. And I will say, with the exception of Māori, and this is a really interesting phenomenon, and this, you know, I can't see this happening in many other countries around the world at the moment, but you often get really radical narratives sneaking in through the mainstream because of Māori. You often have people who, you know, will talk about the fact that we're all colonized, that we're living under a colonial system, talk about things like alternative ways of living with the land and alternative relationships with property that isn't just, you know, private ownership and exploitation and personal profit. All of that is extremely radical. It's pretty out there, you know, and in other nations that don't have an indigenous population that is as empowered as Te Ao Māori is, those narratives just don't sneak into the mainstream at all. And so in Aotearoa, it is interesting that we do have, for example, a Green Party that's for realsies quite leftist on some issues. In other countries, they have really useless Green Parties, you know, And I do feel like it's because, you know, in large part because of Māori normalizing more radical conversations and normalizing talking about, actually, we don't have to live under the system. And someone keeps asking in the comments, and I would like to respond to this.
Oh yeah, pātai mai. It's hard actually to look at the questions while we're having our discussions, but very keen for
what
questions.
What is tino rangatiratanga, and how can it exist alongside the current system? And, you know, this is something that they often bring up, you know, that we don't have examples of this and so on and so forth. So how could it be? But actually we do. And this came out in the submissions as well, that, for example, people who run kaupapa, kohanga reo, and wānanga spaces, and the way that they called them sites of resistance. Those are already examples, not full-on tino rangatiratanga, but they are expressions, let's say, of tino rangatiratanga, where Māori are on a small scale at least able to exercise their own authority and to have an entire kaupapa organized in the way that they want to. And guess what? It's open to everyone. So this whole idea that the government is trying to put forth that Māori systems will be separatist, that they would be like apartheid, there's no evidence, in fact, for that, because all the current
fear-mongering
expressions of tino rangatiratanga are open to anyone. Kura kaupapa and so on. You can go if you're not Māori. You can go to a wānanga and study there if you're not Māori. And so, and you can contribute. And by the way, is it kohanga reo or kura kaupapa where you have to volunteer?
Kohanga reo.
And that's an amazing aspect of it that highlights the difference in culture, right? It's not some random overseas organization coming in for profit, trying to manage these kids in the most profitable way possible. The model actually requires parents of children to come and volunteer at the schools. And so it's co-run by the community itself. It is the most direct example of democracy in this country, is the way that Māori organize themselves in their expressions of tino rangatiratanga. So in terms of what examples are there, we do have examples, and guess what? They're open for everyone, and they are doing really well.
Yeah.
Children that go to Māori schools do better than children that go in Pākehā schools, and even better than Māori and non-Māori children that go to Pākehā schools. They just on average do better than everyone else in the country. So Māori for Māori, and totally unsurprising, right? That democratic institutions that involve the parents, that involve the community, end up with better solutions for the children. And so, you know, it's funny, right? Because David's, no, I won't say David Seymour, in Rodney Hyde's bill, the Treaty Principles Bill, it tries to say that, you know, we want tino rangatiratanga for everyone, right? Of course, we can't have that, because we know tino rangatiratanga is a concept that, you know, should be understood as Māori sovereignty. So specifically has Māori tied into it.
Yeah, and again, it's just, you know, he's saying everyone has it. So it's again failing to understand that we're talking about something outside of the Crown's authority. Tino ranga, everyone can have tino rangatiratanga under colonial rule. So again, it's failing to understand that the thing that we're talking about exists outside, and it's trying to reframe it as being still something that can only exist within the colonial system.
Exactly. And this inability to look outside the colonial system, this is applied to every argument that we have with the government and what they're doing. They're always limiting it to...
They got to big themselves up. Like, you know, that's why it's up to us on the outside to be pushing. Like, never trust the politician's narrative on something, you know? But as well, in tino rangatiratanga, like, what is tino rangatiratanga? Like, what is Crown authority? What is that? Is it absolute authority, or is the expectation that Crown authority means that they should still be engaging with local communities? They should still be engaging with iwi and hapu. You know, of course they should. I think people are framing tino rangatiratanga as this absolute dictatorial kind of power. The problem with two separate systems in Aotearoa is that all of our resources are weirdly tied up. You know, boundaries have been cut, and, you know, that river runs onto that property and da-da-da-da-da, but the spring is here, so do you own the water because the spring is on? You know, all of our resources are all tied up together. That is the difficult part of conceptualizing what would two different systems look like. So at the end of the day, it's a complicated discussion around money and resources, which is all very annoying, and those who currently own the most resources and have the most greed are going to be pushing for that status quo to be continued. And so they're poisoning the narratives from where they are. But, you know, this fear that some people have that giving Māori authority will give Māori, you know, the ability of a veto power. You know, oh, Māori having this veto ability to be able to say no to anything. Well, it's like, that's how things should exist. In a cooperative system where you have two competing powers, they're gonna have to come together every now and again. They're gonna have to have a relationship. And if one of them says no, if one of them puts their foot down and says no, if the Crown puts their foot down and says no to Māori on something, then you're gonna have to workshop it. You're gonna have to work it out. There's gonna have to be some compromise. And likewise, if Māori put their foot down on something, and they should have the right to do that, you know, you imagine someone coming into your community, dictating to you what happens. If you want to put your foot down, then the expectation is that you putting your foot down should be respected. And what happens beyond that has to come through wānanga, discussions, meeting each other.
Consensus building. And
consensus building.
Hard to conceptualize in the colonial system, because the colonial system tries to dominate everyone in the nation under one set of laws. It's inherently anti-democratic, this idea that we just vote once every 3 years and then they have complete authority over our lives, whereas in the Māori systems of governance, each community decides its own tikanga. Each community comes around and makes its own democratic decisions, so it's far more democratic. As someone said, that in 1800s judge and magistrate Francis Dart Fanton said that there is no system of governance that the world has ever seen that could be more democratic than that of Māori. Absolutely. And that's because it's grassroots. You have families in the form of hapu that come together and make decisions directly for their community. And what we're being forced to live under, I was trying to come to this point before. David Seymour says, tino rangatiratanga for everyone. We believe in tino rangatiratanga for everyone, right? Of course, he's warping the idea of tino rangatiratanga because that can only be for Māori, but, and it's like everything else that they do. They play on half-truths, right? Yep. We actually do believe in self-determination for everyone. We genuinely believe in that. So like Māori being able to enact their own systems of self-determining governance, tino rangatiratanga, but we also believe that everyone in society should be liberated from dictatorial colonial rule. We believe that hapu-led governance in Māori societies can be a model for everyone else in the country to be like, hold on, we want to live in a community that just governs itself directly. We want to be able to be authors of our own lives, just to quote Elizabeth Rata. Sorry, everyone. Don't quote Elizabeth Rata. Oh my goodness, she's in my brain now.
But absolutely.
But
decolonization.
The idea that we want everyone to decolonize, starting with tino rangatiratanga as a model for everyone, hopefully in Aotearoa, but also all over the whole entire world. The idea that we can live in self-governing communities. And yes, these communities will have to talk with the other communities in the country, whether they're Māori or otherwise. That's just logical. That's just rational. And that's why Mataki Mai talks about, when it talks about constitutional transformation, it talks about the Māori sphere, the colonial sphere, but also a sphere in between where they communicate. But it's just ironic to me that he would say he believes in tino rangatiratanga for everyone, but really he believes on subjecting everyone to the extremely oppressive colonial rule. Whereas it's us, decolonial activists, who believe that everyone should have the ability to self-determine their own community and what's best for their own people and community, of course, starting with tino rangatiratanga. So, you know, these arguments that the right wing run with are often based on half-truths. They're often based on universal truths. You know, we all believe in freedom for everyone. You know, things like that, things that we can all agree with. You know, we're all against apartheid. Well, ironically, the ACT Party is not against apartheid. They support apartheid of Israel. And I think a lot of what they say is projection of things that they themselves actually like and support.
Yeah, well, they have to convince everyone, right? Like, they have to be sneaky with their narratives. That's the whole thing with the ACT Party. If you didn't know anything about Te Tiriti or about colonization, the history of Aotearoa, you know, if you haven't been benefiting from the new history curriculum, which is looking like it's potentially on the chopping block in terms of being refreshed, rebalanced, they say. So watch out for that one. But, you know, if you are unaware of our history, you know, when you hear David in terms of what he's saying, it sounds sensible. But of course, you know, it's as you say, it's those half-truths. It's trying to, you know, it's trying to subvert the whole thing, imposing their narratives on things and having that, trying to embed that as our default understanding. Like the special rights argument that they use. I thought you said it really well the other day. They're all like, they frame it like this. They're like, you think that Te Tiriti gives you special rights, but we think da-da-da-da-da-da, you know? And so then they go on with their argument, but then we're over here and all we hear is them framing our argument and denying our argument. All we hear is them denying our argument, but they've framed it for us. And we've gone along with their framing of our argument. But it's not how we would have ever posed the argument in the beginning. And then as soon as you engage with them about their argument, which they have framed, they've already taken a step forward in terms of the conversation, the narrative that they are trying to cement. As soon as we engage with them on that and accept, oh no, yeah, there are special rights that I want, and yeah, I guess that's in Te Tiriti, you know, we've gone off of that whole discussion that we've been trying to have of Māori sovereignty, and that Te Tiriti acknowledges our pre-existing rights. You know, this inherently racist colonial system has been imposed on us. And, you know, I don't view what we talk about in Te Ao Māori as being special. It's just the normal. We should all be connected to our local environments where we're from. We should all have the kind of connection, you know, with our marae, for example, with our maunga, our awa, our local landscapes, you know, tangata whenua. We should have a close relationship with the taiao. We've all been separated. We've all been detached. But the rights, I like it the way that Debbie Ngarewa Paka frames it, more like responsibilities, you know, that we have to look after our beautiful landscapes. That is a responsibility. And I think we should all be connected and understand that responsibility. It's a beautiful thing. But the way that they're framing it, of course, it doesn't acknowledge any of that. It's in fact to disrespect, in many cases, those landscapes, to really detach ourselves, to continue that trajectory of detaching ourselves. That's what they want. To acknowledge, you know, what I'm talking about in terms of us having that relationship, it's just not something that they can do. They can't go there at all. But we should be talking about it like that way, in my opinion. The deep connections that we have to whenua, and that it does place us in some form of hierarchical responsibilities to those landscapes. I have an innate responsibility that I feel to protect my local awa, for example. And that only comes from understanding my whakapapa and understanding my connection to this whenua here. That is a thing about me that I have because of that world that I believe that exists outside of the colonial world. That is a responsibility that I feel that has been passed down to me via whakapapa. But that is something that they would say has been carved out as a special right. It's just ridiculous, the way that they've decided to frame it. And we're falling into that trap of accepting their framing of the situation. And it's become so normalized for us to do that. And of course, the media repeats their framing. You know, the media is the megaphone of the government. And then the government frames our position, and because it's so normalized and repeated, it becomes the default. It becomes our default understanding of the situation. And it's just so perverse, so far. Like, someone even, I heard a parent explaining to their child, this child was filling out a submission against the Treaty Principles Bill, which is awesome. But the way that I heard the parent describe the situation to their child, they essentially just repeated what David Seymour said. You know, in David Seymour and the ACT Party, they always do this. They say, you know, they're so manipulative and so controlling that they define to us how we are meant to argue back against them. Like David Seymour is like, oh, what the critics of the bill have to argue is da-da-da-da-da-da. I'm like, what? Why are you telling me how I'm meant to be arguing with you? So they try to frame it from the beginning, always. And anyway, this parent was describing it to their child and essentially just word for word giving her child what she believed the argument was from David Seymour.
Wait, no, can you be more clear? Like what? Saying what?
Well, she repeated the argument to the child. So the child is like, what's going on here? What do I do here? What do I fill out here? And mum's talking to her kid saying, oh, well, David Seymour says that we shouldn't have special rights, that the treaty doesn't give us special rights. And she was essentially saying that, you know, because, you know, Māori were here first and we have our rights, is it okay, and our special rights, is it okay that now this new set of laws which wants equal rights, you know, she framed it like that.
There's an argument between equal rights and special rights.
Yeah.
It's yeah. And then,
anyway, and so just it got the kid thinking. The kid was like, "Ooh, should we all have equal rights, or should Māori have special rights?" And you could, it was painful. You could see the child was like, "Oh,
was a bit confused.
Actually, equal rights sounds kind of good, mum." And she kind of had to convince him out of that. And it's just that painful thing. Like the child knew that something was wrong.
You're
like,
starting from a bad point, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But it's just seeing these arguments. They frame out arguments and then we see it being repeated in all sorts of places, unfortunately. Because people think, oh, he's a politician. He's framing his position. He's explaining what his bill is about. But as soon as we start talking about his bill with his framing, then we've already made progress for them in terms of the narrative and the understanding that they're trying to perpetuate.
We're already giving into the argument that we all have to live under the colonial system and that we all get our rights from the colonial system. So whether we're getting different or the same rights, we're agreeing from that starting point that these rights are being divvied out by the colonial system. So they warp that starting point. And I wanted to show this. This is a list of everyone who submitted for the Treaty Principles Bill. And this is like, you know, Mike Hosking was saying, oh, some people were against, some people were for. You had experts on both sides. Who knows what the truth is? But you look at the list and that's just not reflected in reality.
Oh, man, we need to do like a tick cross. I mean, it takes so long, but just to show the ratio. Like, where is the official count, right? In terms of submissions.
I'm expecting that to come at some stage. But what this list shows is that you have unions, a numerous number of union, Council of Trade Union, Tertiary Union. You have student groups, Otago University Students Association, Māori Law Association, Victoria University, Otago University Law Association.
Collectives.
Right? You have groups of people across all
Iwi,
society
Hapu.
councils, a number of councils submitted, Auckland Council,
Auckland
Christchurch
Council,
Youth
yeah.
Council, Dunedin City Council, of course Māori groups and public services across the board.
Former prime ministers
yes.
from both sides, National
Lawyers,
and Labour.
Current judges, and that's another thing is that they, on the other side, they didn't have any current legal experts. They had retired legal experts, people who don't care about their reputation anymore, but there is no current legal expert at all arguing on their side because the facts are clear when you look at them. And so it's simply not true that there is an equal level of expertise on both sides. We certainly had experts on one side, community groups, and, just representation of the wider public. And then on the other side, you had Julian Batchelor. So, and, Aaron
Hawkins.
Aaron Hawkins,
The Fox of Dunedin.
Why do you call him that?
I don't know.
Do you think he's attractive?
He's just got this beautiful silver hair. Yeah, I think he's got a good head of hair. Yeah. Oh, he's just, he's such a homie. He's just so good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as well he's like vegetarian or vegan. So we're a bit
so
biased.
You really like him.
We're a bit biased. But he's just a solid proud Pākehā. And Pākehā, people should be proud to be Pākehā, I think,
Mm-hmm.
It's a kupu ingoa that has gotten a bit of a bad rap because, back in the day, our tupuna would have been like, oh, the Pākehā, and even nowadays, there's lots of stuff we can blame on Pākehā, unfortunately. And so it's just become a word that we say with disdain often, unfortunately. But, I'm very proud of a lot of Pākehā, and I think it is a culture, it's a whakapapa that's unique to Aotearoa, just like tangata whenua. And I think it should be embraced more. I see often, people are calling themselves tangata tiriti, which I think is really cool. But I don't want to see the loss, the full assimilation of Pākehā into tangata tiriti. I think there's a lot of things on the Pākehā side of our whakapapa that we can be proud of, and it's certainly not a cuss word that like a lot of people think of. But anyway, Aaron Hawkins, he's a homie. He's a homie. How about Pātai? We'll yarn for another 20 minutes or so, or whatever. But how about, because we said we'd do a Q&A, but just when we're doing our back and forth, it's so hard to actually see Pātai that are coming in. So if anyone has any Pātai, throw it in the comments. We'll just pull up the first Pātai that comes through, and we'll start answering them. Make sure you put a question mark on it, otherwise I'm not even going to look at it because there's a few things going on over there. But any concluding thoughts that you wanted to have about the Treaty Principles Bill? I mean, we didn't even say, I wanted to talk about how, is it a distraction? Some people have been saying, is it a distraction? Well, it's hard to say. I don't know. But what it has done, right, is we've converged all of our energy on this. And, with the hikoi, for example, I think those who are leading the hikoi, they noticed very early on that the media were hyper-focusing on how we were opposing the Treaty Principles Bill. But of course, the hikoi wasn't just about the Treaty Principles Bill. It's about all of the attacks that the government were doing at the time, Has it been a distraction? We've definitely focused on it. And, National didn't need the Treaty Principles Bill to disestablish Te Aka Whai Ora. Didn't need the Treaty Principles Bill to roll back the smoke-free legislation or to remove Section AA of Oranga Tamariki. All of these things. They've been breaching Te Tiriti since the signing, right? But what it has done is it's brought up this really divisive, ugly way of talking about Māori issues. And it's stopped us from really hammering the government on its current breaches, and it's made us focus on the real blatant narrative attacks against our sovereignty. And, New Zealand First, of course, with their review of the references of treaty principles and legislation, that's going ahead. I wouldn't call it a distraction, but the consequences have been that it's forced us to focus on it. And I think there are many other things that we could be talking about. But I think, although it has had this really negative impact on a lot of us, just like the early days of colonization and the first signing of Te Tiriti, Māori came together to unite against colonization. And again, what we've seen is this re-galvanizing of that energy of us all coming together to be against colonization, to reaffirm our Māoritanga, I would say. Because for me, that's what it means to be Māori, is to confront and fight back and resist colonization. Like before colonization here in Aotearoa, we didn't call ourselves Māori, for example. We just associated by the various names of our hapu. So for me, no ngaitu te auru. That's, I would say, I'm a ngaitu te auru Ian, or a ngaitu te auru descendant. Māori, what does Māori mean? Māori, it means many things, but one of the uses for the word Māori means normal. And so, you know, those early days of colonization, Pākehā came over here and like, oh, what are you guys? Looking at Māori, Pākehā, they're like, what are you guys? And us Māori was like, what do you mean? We're normal. We're Māori. And then, so then they started calling us Māori. And then it became a thing from there. And so for me, the whakapapa of calling ourselves Māori is recognizing that convergence of us all to resist colonization. And it, you know, it's one of the, you know, this is probably a controversial point, but it's why I don't believe people like, you know, the Polynesians, people like David Seymour, people like Shane Jones who have switched sides, people like Winston Peters. If you're not resisting colonization, then for me, it's hard to justify your inclusion in that political ideology of Māori. And I think it's okay to call those things out and to talk about those things. Doesn't mean that all Māori need to be the same, but it needs to be acknowledged that we do have a history, a very deep, powerful history of us fighting back, resisting against this colonial force. And those who talk about kaupapa Māori, Leonie Pihama, for example, she says that the definition of kaupapa Māori is that it must be disruptive to the current colonial system, because it acknowledges that the current system does not work for us. And I'm not saying that the alternative system that Te Ao Māori is good for just Māori. You know, this colonial system, it oppresses all of us. And it's not that there's another better system that exists out there just for Māori. There's another better system out there that exists for all of us. This colonial system, it's not just the white man's system, you know, it just happens to be the current system that is in power, that this greedy current system that is, it's not like it just hates Māori, you know, it would oppress anyone. It's just that Māori happened to be the indigenous population here that it was able to use for its means.
Yeah, and I think, you know, with the word Māori meaning normal, it encapsulates a lot of what this argument is about, because
like, we're just trying to be normal.
they're like, oh, you want your special rights, and then you're like, no,
Just the
we
Māori
just
ones.
want our normal rights, the normal rights that existed before colonizers even came here. The normal, you know, weren't even perceived as rights, because even the concept of rights is that the colonizer gives it to you, but that's a very colonial way of looking at things, that your rights are derived from some sort of legal system, as opposed to just inherently being attached to you as a person. I have my own rights as a person, regardless of what the state and regardless of the legal system say. So the idea that rights come from laws is itself is a very colonial idea, and indigenous people didn't view it like that. But the idea that Māori means normal and Māori exercising their own sovereignty was just the normal thing that was happening before colonizers came here. But colonizers insisted that they have a special right to set up their own government here. And they were willing to go to war over it. And in the end, a compromise was made under Te Tiriti o Waitangi, where Māori are able to retain their normal sovereignty, but the colonizer is able to now build their own special colonial government and give themselves their own special colonial rights that they want to give on this land. Kapai, that happened under Te Tiriti o Waitangi. The normal Māori sovereignty and the special colonial government were meant to coexist. But now they're reframing the government that Māori sovereignty is a special right, when in reality, it's the colonizers acting like they have a special right to continue having their sovereignty and to continue having their government over this land, not only over themselves, but over everyone in the country, including Māori. while stopping Māori from being able to have their normal sovereignty that they had before the colonizers even came here. And even just looking at it through the chasm of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, colonizers are acting like they have the special right to exercise what was promised to them under Te Tiriti o Waitangi, while Māori are not able to exercise what they're promised under Te Tiriti o Waitangi. So no matter how you look at it, it's the Crown that's acting like they have a special right to have sovereignty, while erasing the Māori right for sovereignty, when both are promised under Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and when Māori sovereignty was actually the normal thing that existed on the land before colonizers got here. So colonizers are the one acting like they have special rights. They're acting like their special rights are so bloody special that they can control everyone, even the people who preceded them. Even the people who had their own systems of governance before they came along.
Yeah, and like they have been executing their veto ability over us to dictate to us for generations. You know, and it's a fear that some people have that Māori will have that ability. They're fearing that while allowing that to happen. You know, this ultimate power that the Crown has to dictate to us, to reject what is in Te Tiriti.
That's
they're
why
exercising that.
They're projecting, you know, and even the whole special right thing is it's a projection. They're,
Okay, let's get some patai.
I think there are none.
There's this one. How do you both have beautiful skin?
Come on, don't click on silly things like that.
It's the veganism.
No, I have terrible skin. I'm wearing foundation.
No, yeah, the camera's not that high quality. Our comments aren't coming up. That's a shame.
Oh, are we still streaming?
Oh well,
I hear
oh,
you
there we
there.
go. Kai matara. Pata. Oh, there's just a bit of lag, it looks like.
Okay, but hold on, I didn't actually finish.
Kabai, aroha.
I just think it's hilarious that they're twisting Māori, which means normal, to now be special. And isn't that the classic colonial otherizing mechanism? To name what is normal as the outsider, as the difference. And you see this, you know, in all colonizing countries around the world. And the fact that they put the idea of race on Māori, when Māori was always meant to just mean the normal people of this country, they came in and they were like, oh, you're of a different race. And now all of the discussions that we have about the treaty, when the colonizers frame it, it's about race. And you told me before this, you know, we started this discussion that the tribunal once said that it was a partnership between two races, that they said at one time.
The Court of Appeal,
the Court
I
of
believe.
Appeal? I don't mind. The Court of Appeal called it a partnership between two races. Then Jacinda Ardern repeated that. And that's their evidence for why it's between two races. Even though Te Tiriti o Waitangi doesn't say that, and no expert on Te Tiriti o Waitangi has ever said that. And it's like those people, the Court of Appeal, Jacinda Ardern, they're not decolonial activists. They don't know the complexities, and they may even be on the side of the colonizer. So yes, for them, the colonizer has always viewed Māori to be this other race to the white people because that's how colonizers think, when in reality, Māori has always meant just the normal people, the normal sovereignty, the normal tikanga, etc., etc. And it's just hilarious that they went and took the word normal and otherized it by saying, oh, it's the special, it's the other, it's the different, you know?
Yeah. It's a great point around how racializing things is an imported Western ideology. This idea of racializing, segmenting, differentiating someone based on race. It's not an indigenous ideology. It's just completely imported. And then for them to use it against us and all of these things, to talk about race-based policies when they are the ones who invented race. Yeah. And then, of course, you know, that's another one of those half-truths, you know. They'll start the conversation by talking a little bit about how race is a social construct. And it is. But it's their social construct. But they're saying now that it's a thing that we're clinging onto, but it's a category that they put us into so that they could discriminate against us. Crazy. But anyway, patais. So kaimatara, tēnā koe. I know from experience that existing as Indigenous people in itself is a radicalizing event in itself. But what else radicalized you and made you more attentive and aware? Okay, Akwe?
Well, I guess as an Iraqi, it's like, yeah, it's like that political consciousness that you are raised with. You know, like, oh, why is there bombs outside? And your parents are like, oh, because, you know, America wants to occupy our land or our oil reserves because they want X and Y and Z. And I feel like that inherently radicalizes you because you're like, oh, whoa, the world is willing to conspire against you and come into your country and murder your people just for resources. And that's inherently a radicalizing thought. But then in terms of me being radicalized in Aotearoa, at first I became aware of the animal agriculture industry and just what happened to animals here and around the world. That further radicalized me. And then the final straw was at law school, basically just doing the mere basics about the history of this country. Like, honestly, I went all through high school and didn't learn anything meaningful about Te Tiriti o Waitangi or colonization. It wasn't until law school when I read that there was an English draft and the Māori text, and the way that they have breached the Māori text and tried to use the English draft. And my whole world, you know, just exploded from then. And the way I viewed this country completely changed. And I realized that it was based on a lie, that there was this colonial government that was enforcing itself on this nation, just like we had in Iraq, but just in a different way. This was a settler colony. And, you know, we reflect on that sometimes, like how different it is. Because for us, you know, in countries that are impacted by imperialism, we face like direct violence and wars and bombs and all that horrific stuff. But at the end of the day, our culture is intact. Like, everyone in Iraq speaks Iraqi. We are still like, you know, less so, you know, as the years go by, but we are still very much tied into our historical culture and traditions and so on. But living in a settler colony is very interesting. It's very different because the norm is this white European violent settler colony culture. And that's the normalized culture of the land. And Māori culture is, which is the normal people of this land, it's the normal culture that should be just the normal culture that's understood and celebrated, is constantly otherized. And they're constantly being racist against it. And I find that really surreal. To live in a country where the people of this country are constantly otherized, you know, although we face a lot more direct violence in countries that are victims of US imperialism, at least we haven't been completely settled and are still able to exercise our cultures. So it is a different experience. And once you awaken to the fact that of what's happening on this land, it is quite radicalizing. What about you?
Well, for me, it was understanding the food system. And like, you know, food is really how, you know, it's the fuel of human beings. You know, you think about the power of the oil and gas industries, right? Like the food industry, it makes no sense, you know, in terms of, you know, capitalism and creating products. Food is one of those things where they just went hard, you know, in terms of a consumerist product that they can convince us to buy. It doesn't make any sense. The food industry doesn't, it's there to make money. You know, farmers and governments talk about producing food to feed our populations, but it's not there to feed us. It's there to control us and to extract from us, to make us sick in some cases, and to keep us into various ideologies. I mean, the way that we talk about food here in Aotearoa, you know, they've been a bit quiet, but the farming lobby, the farming lobby groups in Aotearoa, I would say, are the strongest lobby groups that we have in the country. They have the most political sway, I would say, visibly from the lobby groups that are observable. They are the most powerful, if not our collective Te Ao Māori movement, if not us, then I would say the farming lobbyists are the most powerful. But anyway, you know, nothing ever makes sense. Just look at our dairy industry. We take all of our water, like in Kaipara, in Dargaville, they are under the strictest water restrictions that the town has ever seen. And then you just look at the landscape and you look at all of the farms. And yes, it is primarily known for kumara in Kaipara. It's the kumara capital of Aotearoa. But if you simply look at the numbers, and I know that avocado farms are getting a lot of flack at the moment. Well, the reason why avocado farms are getting a lot of flack at the moment is because it's a new industry that people are coming into. So the already stretched system of water allocation, it's already stretched and depleted. And so now new avocado farmers are trying to get in there. But you look into the numbers and you understand the amount of water used to irrigate. You know, we extract all of this water from our aquifers and from our rivers to put them into irrigators to then go onto grass, and then the cows eat the grass, and then we extract the milk out of the cows, and then we use these coal burners to dehydrate and dry the milk, and then we send that overseas for them to then rehydrate the milk powder. It makes no sense at all, just in general, the food system. But then on top of it, the thing that just pushed me over the edge and turned me into a passionate human being who was just like pushed over the edge, you know, it really changed me.
What?
Was just watching slaughterhouse footage.
Oh.
Just watching slaughterhouse footage, you know, seeing the way that we treat our fellow earthlings, and understanding the narratives that politicians and governments and corporations use to justify those things. You know, it's the darkest aspect of humanity, if you ask me, a slaughterhouse. And often slaughterhouses are set up in low socioeconomic areas.
Yeah.
And often we are thankful for that mahi being available. But you talk to people who have lost limbs, you know, people who are traumatized from that line of work. And it is not the line of work that I believe we should be putting on our people who don't have any other option. You know, when you put a particular line of work somewhere and there are no other options, that's a form of slavery. Because otherwise, what? You're going to cut their benefits. Okay, well, you have to mentally abuse yourself in this horrific industry that society doesn't even want to look at. You know, I don't blame people for not wanting to watch that kind of stuff. But for me, because I grew up homeschooled, I didn't have other friends. Like, I got my social needs from my animal kin who were around me. I used to talk to the trees. You know, I'd go outside, go wild, talk to myself, talk to the animals. And then to see this type of industry that is cemented into the identity of our country, and to see corporations place propaganda over it to justify it, and to have us human beings go against our natural instinct. You know, I'm not saying that everyone needs to give up these products or change, become vegetarian or vegan or anything like that. But we need to be making informed decisions. We need to be fighting back against propaganda that cements and perpetuates these inherently harmful systems. It exists everywhere. And you know, personal change is hard. Behavioral change is really hard. But something that I'm a real advocate for is making informed decisions. We can disagree, that's all good. But let's try to get proper information out to our people so that those decisions can actually be made. But anyway, that's what radicalized me. And
then there was a whole other journey of you connecting with your Te Ao Māori, which I feel like further radicalized you.
Yep, definitely. For me, the whole vegan stuff was very much like a personal kind of thing. But after I started working for a Māori health organization in my town and understanding the socioeconomic issues that we didn't put ourselves in, you know, all of these, you know, we're products of our environment, right? The poverty that we currently exist in is because of political decisions that have been made. And when I started waking up to that, oh, wow, that is because of various legislation, it made me wake up a bit and understand that, oh, okay, even though I don't want to do politics, politics is still doing our people. You know, I used to be kind of just switched off to all of that stuff, but once I started realizing that, oh shit, actually, decisions that politicians make has real world implications for our people on the ground, then got rid of the apathy and tried to engage myself.
And it really highlights how you need that personal experience with people to grow your empathy. And so it's very hard for us to reach people who will, for example, just never interact with Māori in their day-to-day lives. and people whose personal experiences will just never lead them to crossing paths with the issues that we're speaking of. It's really hard to reach them because they will be operating in an ideological basis. And because of their lack of personal experience, the, government and the right-wing lobby groups are able to come in and plant stories in their heads about what Māori tino rangatiratanga looks like, for example, because once you have these direct examples, like we talked about with kura kaupapa and so on, you realize that these expressions of tino rangatiratanga don't threaten anything about your daily lives, and there's nothing to be afraid of. But because they don't know, they've never seen it, they've never experienced it, these people are able to plant this, lies and propaganda that scare people about what it really means.
Yep.
Should we answer any more?
If there's any more, Pātai, but it just made me think, about like when all of the stuff was happening with the mandates. Can we say the V word? Can we say the C word? The COVID vaccine mandates. And I'm pro-choice. But having people react in the way that they did in terms of, oh, there's a genocide going on. For me, being Māori, I'm just like, guys, like, welcome to the party. Like, welcome to the understanding that the government is capable of genocide. For a lot of these people, like new activists into the space who got all up in arms about the mandates, started talking to all of us like, you guys need to wake up. You guys need to wake up. The government is actually not our friend. I was like, okay, cool. Welcome to the party. Let's see where we can find some common ground.
Yes, but they were led astray to believe that was the biggest thing coming from the government. And
it's just like the point. I bring it up because of the point you say about needing to have that personal connection with something. All of these people,
right? Yes, exactly.
were just people who were just unaffected by everything, and they didn't wake up to the government, to the nefarious nature of the government, until something did happen that personally impacted them.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, that's just a problem with empathy and reaching people. And that's why at the end of the day, the best thing that we can do is simply educate people, try and give them those life experiences, try and share Māori culture and Māori expressions of tino rangatiratanga with people. Because, that's another thing with the media, is that they just don't show those examples. They only show negative aspects of te ao Māori. So people have a very limited picture of what te ao Māori looks like. I think we should close down the stream. I just wanted to address this one comment by our dear friend Ketefia.
Kia ora, Kete.
That, we also would like to explore building partnerships with BIPOC directly. She says we've clung to this Western BIPOC binary partnership too long without fruits. I'm also interested in how we can build alliances outside of the colonial system, how we can start building collectives that come together with other collectives. And, when it comes to BIPOC and immigrants, we have our own work to do. We have our own massive journey to do before we can meet Māori there, I reckon, in my opinion. But it is happening, because what this government is doing is that they're accelerating the coming together of our communities by attacking immigrants, by attacking BIPOC people, and everyone can see, okay, these people, they're our shared enemy. And I feel like that's the first starting point that we all need to jump off, is we all have a shared enemy. They're attacking all of us here in Aotearoa, but also all of our people around the world. Like this government being Zionist, supporting Israel's actions, helping to bomb people in Yemen, supporting the United States agenda around the world. I think that that's something that we can vibe on, is that it's not just a colonial government here, but a government that's willing to colonize Māori in Aotearoa is a government that's willing to align itself with other colonial governments that are oppressing people around the world. And I think immigrants are starting to get that. They're starting to understand that this is just a colonial government through and through. If they support Israel, that's not an outlier. It's because they're colonizing Māori here as well. And I think we can build on that. We can build on that understanding that this is just simply an extension of Western imperialism. It's not a new or a random thing in itself, and that their agenda is united against all Indigenous people around the world. And so, yeah, I think we can and should build off that starting ground as BIPOC and Māori communities. What do you think?
Oh, we need to be exploring things ourselves and building power in places, not relying on the government. And of course, like one of the main things that really pisses me off about the government is that they speak on behalf of us. They speak on behalf of everyone in Aotearoa. And so, you know, a favorite thing of mine in terms of us having our sovereignty recognized is our people, our leaders could be putting out various statements that we don't support what Israel is doing, for example. We don't support what America is doing. We could make strong statements and tie that to, you know, us being tangata whenua, the authority of the Indigenous people here in Aotearoa. So I just very much think anything that we can do to cement our authority, building relationships, absolutely, of course.
Oh, bye. I reckon we should wrap it up since it's been 2.5 hours.
Yeah, ka pai. It's been lovely. Thank you, everyone.
It's been nice. It's been a bit more of a low-key episode. I don't know. For those of you who have been to previous ones, we did this one a little bit different. We tried to have a little bit less evidence.
We go over the top, I think.
Yeah, with our so-called deep dive.
With the presentations, but I enjoy it when we just a bit more casual kōrero. I think, you know, what we want to do is because streams, it's hard to get a lot of people watching streams, eh? You have to be so consistent. You have to do it constantly. We will focus a little bit more on our short reels, right? And like the goal is to produce a bunch of short reels about important topics, time-sensitive topics, because that's the strength of the short reels, right? It's to be able to put them out very quickly, an important opinion that needs to exist instantly. And then, you know, focus on doing a few of those throughout the week. And then at the end of the week, still do the stream, but we just expand on all of those shorter videos and shorter whakaaro that we put out through the week. Mm-hmm. Be a more effective way, I think, potentially, of us getting our whakaaro out there. Mm. But who knows? We always like make it like, we're going to do this. We're going to commit to this.
We're still figuring it out.
We'll see how it goes.
And yeah, please do keep giving us your feedback. We are keen to change and alter the show until we find a good place to land. But definitely keen to continue doing these Friday night 6 p.m. ones. But I think, yeah, we're more interested in this conversational type thing as opposed to some of the previous more presentation type ones. But keen to hear your thoughts. Let us know what you think. Message us if you want to keep it private. Whatever you want to say. And I think someone earlier as well apologized for criticizing some of our foreign policy. But I just want to say there's nothing to apologize. We love criticism because criticism helps us grow. It challenges us. And even if we disagree with the criticism, it's an ability for us to strengthen our arguments when we respond. So no matter how you look at it, we welcome the criticism. So please, don't apologize. We're just thankful that you're here, even though you do disagree with some of what we say, because that's inevitable. We are different people. And through our...
we disagree often.
Yeah.
And I'm waiting for the time that we get into quite a heated disagreement and for us to workshop it together. Hasn't happened yet, but looking forward to it. I think it'll be good. Disagreements are good. Disagreements are really good. It's how we grow. And we have become a society that, shies away from that kind of stuff as soon as it pops up. So, on that note, we believe we will be doing next week's stream. Mm-hmm. We previously announced that we'd be going to a festival, Earthbeat. And I was putting it off because I'm like, trying to practice saying no to these things, especially like if it's far away because we don't like to travel. But this one is kind of, it's before Auckland, so not too far. So I was like, okay, hey, this is all right. And Samah has been really trying to get us to do festivals because she loves festivals. And so this is something that we said yes to presenting at. But we posted it on our stories and one of our followers got back to us and said, you guys should probably research Earthbeat because the founder is a Zionist. whoa, that took us by surprise. And like, wow, we apologized to the organizers of the event because we did not do our due diligence before agreeing to do the presentation. But we're in comms with them at the moment. We might pull out.
We probably will.
We probably will, unless they come back with like an incredible response. But so far, it's probably not looking like that's going to be the case.
It's not the organizer's fault. It's the founder's fault. He is very problematic on his LinkedIn. Pretty much every single piece of activity on his LinkedIn, almost all of his activity on his LinkedIn is very anti-Palestinian, anti-Arab, Islamophobic, and pro-ethnic cleansing and other Zionist agendas. And that's just not something that we can support. And it's very unfortunate. I was looking forward to going to that festival, but it's more important that we stick to our values. And yeah, totally our fault. And next time we have something like that, I think, you know, we need to do a better research on who's founded this, who's organizing it, and even potentially ask our followers and friends if they know anything about it, because that's how we found out.
Screen it for us. But you know, it's funny because it is a space where there will be people who have different opinions. And I'm always saying that we need to challenge ourselves and get out of our comfort zones and enter into these spaces where we are going to have some disagreements. But it's just a step too far. You know, there are places where we disagree with people that we can walk ourselves into and have a discussion without supporting Zionism. And that's the fear for us. One of the main fears, right, is that there's this Zionist entity, and then they're able to say, oh, well, look, see, we've got Aotearoa Liberation League and other pro-Palestine groups who have been working with us. And so, yes, would love to have conversations with people that we disagree with, but would hate to see ourselves being used in that kind of way. So, so sorry to the Earthbeat whānau who reached out to us. Really do appreciate y'all thinking of us, but it's just something, well, we will continue the discussion, won't we? So,
apparently red moon tonight.
Oh, yo.
So everyone check it out. I know it was like so bright and so beautiful last night. It was a bright night. I loved going outside. So yeah, keen to have a look at the red moon tonight. I thought we missed it, but we didn't, according to Kete. So
lovely.
Check it out. Time to jump off this and go spend some time outside, eh?
Moonlight.
Everyone?
Let's go. Moonlight party.
Bye bye.
Thank you all so much. Really appreciate y'all.
Thank you.
Perhaps see you next week. If not, see you out in the trenches. Mōri ora.